Hi, everyone. Welcome to the expense training session. Now, I know many of you are used to entering in expense reports and time and expense 9, and the upgraded version is time and expense 10. Woo woo. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is that the login screen obviously is very different and it doesn't have time or expense on it anywhere. The login screen actually says cost point. So don't let that surprise you. Don't let it, don't be afraid of it. You are on the right login screen. So your username and password, this is information that Laura is going to send out. Just going to type in my username and password, and the system name is going to be Symbionics. Now, if you, obviously there's this remember me option here. So if you check it, the next time you come into this login screen, if your Internet Explorer settings are set to not like clear your cache every time you exit, your username and password, your username and system name will be populated. So all you have to enter in is your password. So I'm going to click login. Now, I'm an admin, so I have access to like all kinds of stuff. So just disregard that. We're going to focus in on the things that the employee and then the supervisor will basically do in the expense system. So when you log in, you're going to see time and expense icons here. And you'll just go into the expense menu and you'll have expense reports. And then you'll have these two options, manage expense report and manage approved expense reports. Now, I want you to go into manage expense report, and that is managing your own expense report. That other screen is going to be for you to do things to other people's expense reports, just like on the timesheet side. Now, something similar here is all of your expense reports that you have in the system will already be populated on this screen. So if you want to go back, I obviously only have one expense report here, so my navigation buttons aren't enabled. But if you have more than one, of course, these navigation buttons are going to be enabled, and you'll be able to, basically tab through all of them or click through all of them. The other option, of course, is to query on a specific expense report date or expense report ID if you've, of course, been working for quite a while and have tons of expense reports in there that you want to look at. So I just want to kind of show you like the basic filled out, expense report to begin with. It's a little different than time and expense 9, but I want you to definitely notice that all of the elements are still here. They're just kind of in different places. So you've got your header section up here at the top, with your expense report ID and the description and all of that information, even the status. Then you'll have all of your, what I like to call the subheader information, and that's going to be, basically all the information that feeds up, okay? So your description, the type of expense report that this is, the from and to dates, any purpose that you have in, which is a required field, so I definitely recommend you put something meaningful in there for you and the supervisors. Locations, of course, are going to be located here. Now, one thing I want you to notice is this is no longer a wizard-based expense report. They're going to call it a wizard-based expense report because all of the elements from the wizard are here. But instead of you having that nifty like next button or whatever to kind of guide you through the wizard, you have the tabs that are in the order that you should fill them out in. The next section, of course, is default charges. And this is where you're going to actually choose the project, that you want this expense report to go to. And then everything to the right of this is going to be filled in once you start putting in expenses. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm going to actually create a new expense report so you guys can see what this is all about. Okay, excuse me just a moment. Okay, so I don't know if you guys noticed that, but check out, I want you to focus, I want everyone to focus in right here, okay? When I'm over here in default charges, it completely changes, okay? So if you are wanting to navigate through your expense reports or go back and create a new one, don't panic because this is different. Just go back to the purpose tab and then you'll be able to get your navigation on or create a new expense report. So I'm going to click new, create a new expense report. And it does start you where you're supposed to start. So that's a bonus here. So I'm going to say the date. I'm going to backtrack just so I can do kind of a range here. The description, I'm going to say this is my training test. And then under type is where you have that option of travel or non-travel. Okay. I'm going to go with travel because that's probably the one that, people use the most. And then I'm going to enter my travel date. So I'm going to say I left on 10/1 and I'm coming back on 10/11. Just gives us an even 10 days of lodging there. My purpose is going to be, let's see. Okay. And then we're going to go to locations next. So remember, once you're done with the tab, you're going to go to the next tab. So if you have frequent locations set up, they're going to be there, for you already. So you should, if you have frequent locations, be able to click on this magnifying glass and you should see your list. I'm a new employee. I don't have any frequent locations yet. So I'm going to start here under country. So as you guys can tell, the start and end date automatically fills in just like it does in Time 9. So if you need to modify those, you should be able to. I'm going to say my country is the United States. And again, the expense report side, just like the time and expense side, just like the time collection side, has this wonderful IntelliType feature. So as you're typing, it's basically going to give you a filtered list of available values. So you can either, once the list pops up, you can either mouse click it, or what I like to do is I like to use my keyboard and down arrow it down to United States and then tab it. So let me go to Alabama. And then I'm just going to continue typing in basically through each field. Now the county, of course, should automatically fill in because that's coming from the per diem files from the government. Now, just like in Time 9, here you have the ability to see your per diem rate. So you can click View here to see, what the system says you're allowed, basically, just in case you want to keep yourself in check, and click Close. Here's the opportunity that you have to make this a frequent location. So if you go to this location quite a bit and you don't want to have to go through and do United States, Alabama, Birmingham every single time, mark this as a frequent location. And yes, by default, every location that you enter in is going to be marked as a frequent location. So if you don't want to make it a frequent location, I suggest you uncheck that, okay? But otherwise, if you have it checked, basically this location description is going to show up in your list. The next time you create an expense report, it'll show up in this in this list here, in this field here. And one thing I definitely want you to know beyond making it a frequent location is you can actually modify this description. So it automatically populates with the city and state, of course, but if you want to, go and abbreviate it because you don't want to have to type in the whole thing, you can make it whatever makes sense to you, because, all of this is going to be specific to you. So I'm done with my location. I'm going to go to default charges next. And here under charge, if you know your project ID, go ahead and type it in, and the IntelliType will kind of help guide you if you kind of forget a segment of the project ID or something like that. But most likely you're going to be like me and, I may not always know my project ID. And for those moments that I don't, I'm going to click on the magnifying glass to actually take me to the charge tree. So here, of course, you'll be able to see all of your valid charges that are only expense related. I'm going to choose Air Force, and then we're done. So one thing I want to note here is under details, this is not a tab you have to fill out. Hopefully you can tell that everything's grayed out. This is basically going to be a summary of all of your expenses. Why they call it details, I think it's hilarious because it's really a summary. So, you know, this is just going to be informational once you get going on your expenses. So from here, I go ahead and save and continue. And you'll notice the message down here that actually says your record modification successfully completed, which means your save is good to go. Now, if there is something missing, you know, that's required for the system to save this record, that message will also be down here. So if you notice that, you know, you tried to save, but it like didn't gray out, so you know it didn't actually save, but you don't know what's going on, look down here towards the bottom and the error should show up. And what's nice about the errors is if you do actually run across one, you should be able to click on it, click on the actual error message itself, and it will take you to the field or to the area of the screen that you need to fill in. So that's a kind of a nice feature. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up for a moment. So I don't know if you guys noticed, when I did do the save, it kind of brought me down to the claimed expenses because the system knows, we know that's what you're going to enter next. But I'm scrolling back up because I want you to see what it filled in the top here. So on that save, it's going to, you know, give it an expense report ID and then fill in your status. You know, and basically literally save this record to the system so you can kind of continue your work. Now in the claimed expenses, let's scroll down here. You'll click on the new button and then it'll start you in the category. So these are all the normal categories that you have in Time 9. It's just no longer in that, you know, little drop down boxes, now in this magnifying glass. And again, if you want to start typing it, of course you can totally do that, and the IntelliType will take over from there, kind of. So I'm going to choose say mileage first. Okay, so this is me traveling. I have to travel more than 50 miles to the airport or something. So of course, under expense type, you guys should be used to this as well. It's going to automatically default to mileage, but if you click on the magnifying glass under expense type, there might be other options for you to be able to choose here. Like right here, mileage motorcycle. I'd love to do that, but we're just going to take the car. Okay. Of course, the expense date, and I'm going to say, you know, this mileage, I did it on the first day. I can get my 0 here. I don't really have any comments. You know, I might say travel to airport, and then, you know, on the other mileage expense, I'll say travel from airport. Now I'll go to detail others. And I'll put in the total number of miles, and I'll say, you know, it's about 110 miles here. None of those are personal. And then you can actually see the rate per mile. So just like Time 9. Now I'm going to go to the amount tab. And this is just going to be, you know, the summary of your expense details here. So after entering one expense, hopefully this isn't a downside for you guys, but after every expense, I would do a save and continue. There are a few quirks because of the way they did, you know, they kind of converted the wizard over, that if you click new expense, you know, if you do multiple expenses in one save, it may miss one. it may accidentally, revert back one of the values on the last expenses or something like that. So me being, the safe, well, I'm going to be safe. I'd rather not be sorry, in the end of this, than have to redo the whole expense report. So I'm going to save and continue after every expense. So I'm going to click new again. And then here I'm going to say transportation. And then again, the expense type automatically defaults in with airfare, but you have these other options as well. So don't forget about your rental car and stuff under this expense type. And let's see, under provider, since that's a required field, I'm going to say employee paid. And I don't really have any comments because I didn't do any seat upgrades. I didn't do anything, anything kind of non-standard. And just as a note from an administrative standpoint, if you do have those types of fees or whatever, anything special in your airfare or your travel, I'd put them in the comments because it is really helpful when you're trying to figure out why did it cost that much, or why is that so cheap? It kind of helps you get admins in that way. So expense incurred, I'm going to say 1,000, and the payment method, I'm going to keep it employee paid. But you guys, if you guys have filled out an expense report, you know that all of these are available here. And obviously, I would say don't choose a pay method unless you know for sure you have it. So like, don't just miscellaneous, by chance choose company Visa LD. Make sure yeah, that one relates to this card that I have. Here you would enter in any personal or unallowable amounts. And again, this would be, pertaining to your travel policies on whether you did a seat upgrade and that's actually allowed or not. And if it's unallowable, you would put it here. And it would just adjust the amounts that are reimbursable. Okay, so I'm good on that one. And now I'm going to save and continue. And I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. So basically, I'm going to do one more expense. I don't actually see any questions yet. I'm going to do one more expense and then submit it so you guys can see, the workflow of things. Lodging is always a fun one to do. And I know these amounts that I'm putting in are very realistic, the even dollar amounts. Okay, so because lodging is obviously per diem, related here, it's going to bounce your amount, your expense incurred against the ceiling for your travel. And this is what it calculated you should have. So you're technically, or you, by you, I mean me, I'm $80 over. And because I'm $80 over the ceiling, it definitely wants an explanation. And I'm going to say, I could not find a cheaper bill. Now, I apologize to the admins if you see an influx of this description. And please do tell me if that's not acceptable. But yeah, I would put in something like this, as my description. Now I'm going to go to the room rate. And I do see a couple questions, but hang on just a moment. I'm going to finish this wizard, and then we'll get onto the questions. So I know you guys are used to entering the room rate and the tax rate, and being able to copy those amounts down, but you don't see any buttons. So I definitely don't want you to fret. We've got a way to copy these amounts down so you don't have to enter everything in. So once you've entered in the first day, if the rates are surprisingly the same for every day. I want you to right click on that line, and you can just copy it just to the next night, or you can copy the room rates to all of the nights. Okay. I'm kind of done with that one. I'm going to save that. Uh-oh. My amounts didn't match. How did that work? Let's see. What do I have? Oh, I'm a day short than what I thought. Oh, here we go. I was wondering what happened. Must have missed a day. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to save and continue. Okay. So documents, I'm kind of going back to the chat and looking at the questions here. The first question is, how do you attach a document? And that is, it really depends on if you're trying to attach your receipt, and that will happen once you submit. So after you've entered in all of your expenses and you submit within the workflow, and you should already see that tab here, within the workflow, you'll be able to actually upload your attachment. Now, I know you'll see down here an attachment link. I don't recommend you use it because it gets lost and it does not get associated the way you think it would within the workflow. So I would just I would wait until you've submitted your expense report with all of your expenses, and then within the workflow, you'll see a task for you to upload your receipt. Now, the next question is, do per diem rates update automatically? Unfortunately, they do not. The admins will have to, on a frequent base, on a regularly frequent basis, download the files from the government site and upload them into Expense. So as long as the admins are on a regular cycle, then the per diem rate should, stay pretty updated. And I do have to say that they release new changes, on a monthly basis. You guys are probably used to that. Now, the next question we have is, can you use future dates now for expense reports? And that is a no. I don't believe you can. That rule, the rules from time 9 transferred over to time 10. So nothing as far as that, those restrictions have changed. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to kind of continue on. Are there any other expenses that y'all want to take a look at? I definitely want you to see that each different type of expense that you enter is going to require some different information. Now, I know you guys can see me scrolling here, and I know you had to do that in time 9 too, and you could kind of minimize the sections. You can still do that in time 10, and that's this button up here. So if you click that button, it minimizes that header section so that, the claimed expenses are just right there in your face instead of having to scroll down, every so often to enter a new expense or review an expense. So other than actually the entry of expenses, I want to kind of look at the different views you have here. So obviously we're in what you call a form view, where, it's focused in on a single expense at a time. When we switch it to table view, this should look a little more like that table that you get after you enter your expenses in the time 9 wizards, and then it kind of populates that table for your claimed expenses. This should look, quasi similar to that. But the bonus to this, layout is that you get so much more information. So if you scroll to the right, you're basically seeing everything that you've entered. Okay, So also remember that if you tend to like this view, and you use it a lot, but say, you want these columns rearranged, don't forget that you have the ability to move these columns around the way you want them, and then go to your little profile guy and then save the application layout changes. So the next time you come into this screen, and flip this into table view, the columns will be like this. Okay. All right. So from here, I'm going to actually, let me open this back up. I'm going to submit it. I know it's kind of a partial expense report, but I don't want to spend too much time entering in a bunch of expenses when they're, the process is about the same. So up here at the top, you're going to click submit. You're going to get that lovely message, that you're in accordance with company policies and procedures. And hopefully you know that already. So we're going to click OK. Took a little bit. But again, upon every save, you're going to get this message down at the bottom. So we're good here. And you'll notice at the top, the status changed to submitted. And now the good stuff, the workflow. When you go to the workflow tab, you'll see everything that's, pending, needing to be done. So you'll notice, okay, we had create, submit. Oh, look here. Here's that attachment task. So we're going to click on this task, and you can leave it in table view or you can pop it into form view, whichever you're most comfortable with. But then you're going to upload the attachment file. Or if you don't have an attachment, you need to put in a reason. So it's kind of one or the other, and then you would choose attachment missing. So I'm going to click upload attachment file. I just happen to have a blank PDF here. And then I'm going to upload. So that process should be very similar to what you guys are currently doing in Time 9. And that completes that task. So I'm going to pop this into table view again so that you can see that that attachment task is now marked completed. So now it's actually moved down to the primary supervisor approval, which it looks like Laura, you're up for my approval on this one. Okay, so just like in the current workflow, I do want to actually go to form view here really quick. I'm sorry, not that one, this one here. And just like your current workflow, you can see who the task can be completed by. And if you have multiple people, you don't get a good, you don't get the full view of everyone that's here. So if you are curious about who this task can be completed by and there's multiple people, don't worry about doing what I just did. Click on this little icon here with a little pencil on it, and you'll get the full list. Okay, any questions? I'm going to unmute everybody to see if we have any questions out there. Okay, all right.
Well, Cheryl, someone asked if I don't know if you answered it or not, if they could upload multiple attachments. I think it was Edwa.
Oh, I see that. In this workflow, you can only upload one attachment because it's for the overall
It's always been like
expense report.
Why are you worried?
Sorry. I mean, we could essentially change your setup up so that it requires a receipt for each individual expense by the employee. But I think that I don't know. I think more people would dislike that than like it. All right, guys. Well, that's kind of it for the employees. I mean, if you don't approve expense reports, we're kind of done. Okay, we've got a question, Laura. Do you see that? Is there a requirement to print the completed expense report to submit with receipts?
Yes, and we are, and I believe I found out it's that printer button that you would print once you submit. It gives you the traveler, and then you would save that, and then you attach your receipt to that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Same thing as we got. It was just like you made it always.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this, but when I click on the print menu, my print options are not set up. So it's actually going to take me to the print dialog. You have to have one of these delivery options selected. My recommendation is either download or local printer. Now, I'll tell you the difference. Local printer will pop up a PDF in a separate, Internet Explorer window, and the download option will actually give you the option to download it locally to your computer. And once you have selected your option and saved it, you'll have to click on the printer icon again. I actually don't think I have Adobe Reader on this server. Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to open it. Okay, but yeah, that's the download option where you can save it somewhere on your local computer. Okay. Oh, nice comment, Kathy. They wouldn't dislike it if you made it optional. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. But just as a note, if y'all do consider doing that, there will be not only this record task here for each individual expense that you enter down here, but there will be an attachment for the employee as well for each expense down there. So this workflow would get kind of big if you have a big expense report. But it's totally up to you guys. All right. So any other questions about the employee expense reports? All right. If not, we're going to move on to the next screen, the manage approve expense reports. Now, this is where you're going to remember, you're going to either do approvals for your employees, or you're going to do an actual entry for someone else that you have some kind of rollover. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone's line again. And again, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in chat. And then at the end, we'll unmute again, just like we did. So this is very similar to the time collection side, where you get to choose the statuses, and you've got options up here to either see your outstanding tasks or to be able to do kind of a query on status. Now, of course, because I don't have any outstanding tasks right now, like the 2 expense reports that I have submitted, they would show up for Laura. So if she logged in, she would actually see, 2 expense reports populated down here right when she goes into the screen. Now, if I wanted to, say, check on someone else's stuff or enter an expense report for someone else, I might start by just doing a filter to see what's out there. Like the employee may have started an expense report for you to continue kind of thing. And that's when I would use, this filter. So I'll say primary administrator, because I believe I have more people in that role. And I'll just filter by Laura here. And we'll say, I want to see kind of everything that's not processed. Okay. Now, just like yesterday, any screen that has this lightning bolt on it enabled, you're going to have to use it. So now that we've selected kind of our criteria, in order to populate all, the screen down here, we're going to click on the lightning bolt. So just like your time collection search box, you get your full counts over here based on what your criteria is over here to the left. And then based on what statuses you have selected here, those are the expense reports that are going to get populated in this table. So it looks like we've got 5 drafts and 3 rejected, and that's what we should be seeing down here. And that does look like what we're seeing here. 3 rejected and 5 drafts. So the drafts actually all of these look fairly old. So I won't really modify any of these. Let me pop this into form view though. So if you were actually working on an expense report that exists for one of your employees, and say you need to, they're not available, so you have to make the change, you would do that here, and then you would submit it here. So I love and hate these screens because, unless you minimize it, you're going to have to do a lot of scrolling, which I really don't love scrolling, if you can if you can tell. Oh, Laura, I see. My bad. Let me go ahead and filter by one of them then. Okay, so just pulling up a different test employee to look at those expense reports. Oh, sorry. So we got these 2 expense reports here. This one's under review, so I'm going to go to the workflow just to scope out like what's going on with it. So this is the one that's pending approval, and these are the folks that can complete it. Now this is I really like looking at the workflow. I don't know how often you guys run into this problem, but I'll often have a group of managers that have like a couple of employees that their expense reports just don't ever go anywhere. They're always caught up somewhere. So instead of the admin always having to troubleshoot, the supervisors will troubleshoot themselves and kind of get on to whoever is holding up the process. So this is obviously a good place to do that. Okay, a couple of questions. If the supervisor made a change, does the employee see this note or comment? No, actually, I don't believe we have that in the setup. So what would happen is I believe they get an email if you submit it for them, is what happens. That they'll see that as a notation. Okay, so the next question, if you as the manager make a change, does the employee see this come? Okay, sorry, same question. So yeah, that's kind of the extent of it, is that you can make a change, but really only upon submission will anything really jump out at anybody. So any other questions? I'm not really sure, how much the managers or supervisors really care about the voucher distribution. But obviously this is a good kind of audit subtask link for the accounting department to see, to make sure everything is going to where it's supposed to go. And then I guess the last thing I really want to cover here is under workflow. Of course, you as the supervisor or manager, you'd be able to see the attachment. So if you know, this attachment here, we should be able to click view attachment and it should open. Now, of course, I apologize, I don't have a PDF reader on this server, so it won't open, but it should, you know, it should open within your PDF reader or Adobe Acrobat or something that's on your local computer. Sure. So within the, Laura is asking if I can explain the workflow and how they approve an expense report. So here, let me go to the top here. See where this button, this launch button is? If you have the ability, if it's in a position, you know, to approve it, you should have an approve button here, but I would most likely pop this into form view, go to the workflow tab. Did it scroll? Okay, sorry, my scroll is not working here. Okay, and then go to the approval task. So I'd select it and then click on perform selected task. So you guys see that right next to perform selected task, you have reject selected task. So if you're, you know, obviously if you're a primary supervisor and you want to reject this expense report, this is the one that you would choose. So, I mean, definitely the thing that you want to do is make sure that you're selecting that record. So oftentimes I'll have, you know, people that are just like clicking in here, and I know it's kind of inconsistent within the system, I will say, that sometimes on some screens, not sometimes, on some screens, when you are selecting in the table like this, it does actually select the record. But 50-50 chance it's not going to select the record. So my, you know, be safe than sorry kind of mentality is always select the record by choosing it over here to the left. When you see this box is highlighted in blue, you know it's selected, no doubt. All right. Any other questions? Any other things that you guys want to go over? I'm actually going to unmute everyone here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm on, I don't even know if I'm unmuted.
I just unmuted everyone.
Oh, she just unmuted. Carol's phone. Perfect.
Okay.
If nobody has any other questions, then we're going to sign off. Thank you for taking the time to do this training. It was very informative.
And how the process, you're going to do it at
Other than that, Cheryl, thank you so much. Great training.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
All right, bye.
Thank you.